In this episode of Swim Against the Tide, we meet Neil Bartholomew. Neil is MD of the retail division of Kcom, who provide internet and voice solutions to their customers across Hull, East Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. We hear about the challenges of moving the business from a monopoly position to being both challenged and the challenger as markets open up. Neil shares insight on how you lead an organisation in constant change and evolve a culture positively to allow them to compete in an ever-changing market. He finally reflects on his career, sharing advice that maybe he wished he'd listened a little bit more in his early days. I hope you enjoy. Good morning. Today we welcome Neil Bartholomew, the MD of the retail division of Kcom. A business is split into two sides. It has its retail, which Neil heads up, and then it has the wholesale and network side. But today we're going to predominantly focus on chatting to his ambition and challenges in that side of the business. So welcome, Neil. Thanks for joining us.
Really happy to be here.
Cool. I think, look, it's always nice to start so that our listeners get some understanding of yourself and your background to see the context of now what you're trying to achieve. And so it'd be great if you could just give us a couple of minutes on your history of getting to this lofty position.
Yeah. Look, I was born in the People's Republic of South Yorkshire. I'm a Rotherham born and bred, still a Rotherham United fan, even though I live down south now in leafy stockbroker belt, Surrey, but my roots are still from Yorkshire. I grew up in a very working class family. My dad worked in the coal mines and as a diesel fitter in various jobs. My mum stayed at home, as a lot of mums did at that point of time. So very rooted down in terms of hard work and what you need to do that. Could have gone to university and didn't. Instead, I went to trainee pub management, where, look, if you want leadership skills, then pub management is the game to go in. But did that for a few years, and then kind of went into more corporate roles. I wasn't actually in telco at all for a while. Did some work with some of the big professional services companies like Accenture and Arthur Andersen. And eventually landed up in a company called NTL, which was a conglomerate of lots of cable companies at the time, very much like the altnet market is now, in terms of that. And that eventually became Virgin Media. I grew up my career in there, spent 16 years in that business, eventually leading all of their kind of customer-facing operations, so sales, service, retentions, field, etc. So really enjoyed that side, leading the, kind of being the general of the army, so to speak.
Yeah.
Really,
I mean, you'll have seen massive change throughout that period, wasn't it? Of dial up through. Maybe some of our listeners won't even know what dial up is.
We were just, when I joined, we were just transitioning from, as you say, dial up, 56 kilobytes per second.
That's kilobytes, not megs, not gigs.
No, not gigs. That was dial-up speed. I think an email's now bigger than that, as a size. So we had that, and we were just in broadband. Now, broadband at that time in Virgin was defined as 128 kilobits per second, and our top speed was we did a 512 kilobyte per second, then eventually a meg came out,
and that was market leading at the time, wasn't it? That's what's scary.
Look, I remember celebrating NTL, the millionth broadband customer, and I think I said the average speed was about 250 at the time. So lots of change, and just in terms of the both the industry, what's happening. So look, loved my time, absolutely loved my time in the industry, in that, big corporate environment. Did a little bit of advisory. I thought when I hit late 40s, I thought I might be able to semi-retire. I was doing a little bit of consultancy, and it was great. Loved it. Kind of been passing on my knowledge to other businesses and what I'd been through. But I got a little bit bored, but I missed the cut and thrust of delivering numbers and a purpose and a longer term. So I joined at again a very, very, very interesting time, both in terms of the industry and in terms of what Kcom was about to go through at that particular point in time.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you for that. I suppose that's a good spot to move through to now, because Kcom is going through, as you say, a lot of change. It's got this juxtaposition of both a challenger and very much challenged now. So it might be interesting just to give some context of where it started life over 100 years ago as Kingston Communications, and how the growth of the business has been, to say why you've got this, let's just say, wonderful project on your hands to deal with what the business is going through at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, history of Kcom. I mean, when it first started, so we are to this year our 120th anniversary, so 1904. Started in terms of, if you remember, again, it's amazing how these things come in circles, but it was franchised telecom companies, telephone companies back in the day. Hull was its franchise and the city at that time, and then there was a company that came and consolidated. So really strange, it was the post office at the time that later went on to become BT. I think that was in the 20s. But Hull stayed independent. And it was the only area in the country that stayed independent as the post office consolidated. Been through various ownerships, including owned by the council itself. Multiple brands, including Kingston Communications, eventually Kcom, as it is now. But yeah, it was the only place outside of, in the UK where, I think it was one in the Channel Islands or, Isle of Man telcos, but in mainland UK where it wasn't BT. And of course, at that point, it was more of a utility, think about it, because you had no choice. You went with Kcom or you went with BT for your phone, then dial-up internet. Of course, there was Virgin Media or NTL and all the cable companies back in the 80s that challenged. But Kcom was never overbuilt by Virgin, so Virgin never actually built the city, never had a cable franchise.
Because you own that network as well, didn't you? You had the infrastructure as well as then the services that were provided through it.
Yeah. And then obviously went into so Kcom, because it's always been that regional business, has actually always stayed slightly ahead of BT. So it was earlier to what people call as ADSL or VDSL, which is fiber to the cabinet. Yeah. And broadband over copper from the last kind of leg. So it was first there. It was actually, strangely enough, the first to try a streaming TV service. Didn't work, but it was an earlier for that. And it was the first area, whereas the you call it the incumbent telco provider, the first to put full fiber across the network. So while as BT are now catching up with that, Kcom did it, decade ago in terms of so it's actually had full fiber all the way to the home for a lot longer, and you kind of think of that from a company that didn't really have a challenger at that time, was still ahead and being very innovative to do that.
Interesting. Because you had a monopoly, you could have just sat back and go, look, sorry guys, that's what you're getting. We're just going to cream off the profits and carry on. But actually, it made you very innovative and very forward thinking.
Yeah, and nimble as a regional business. I mean, that's one of the things as well, is that you are dealing with one set of local authorities, or two eventually, if you kind of count these, was mainly Hull. You're dealing with one area. You're dealing with leaders that can live in the region and can influence the region, and so on. So that regional element, I think, made Kcom in those days more nimble in order to be able to to advance these.
Yeah. And so now, come up to date, you've now got this position where you can go anywhere, and obviously all those nasty big BTs and Virgins can come and play in your backyard.
Yeah.
So how I think it's interesting, that leadership area that you've got now, in terms of you're managing change internally, because you're having to think two ways. You're going to have to defend in some areas without being dramatic, attack in others. How do you manage that, leading that retail side of the business?
You know what? It's really strange. I actually think that the core skills and competencies that you need are actually very similar between whether you're newly being challenged or whether you are trying to challenge, the other incumbents that have got the large market share. And if you think about that, those are, people fear competition for a start, but actually it starts to get, first of all, it's really interesting because you are actually suddenly challenged. Yeah. And if you like the challenge, yeah, it's a great place to be. You have to have innovation. So you have to suddenly, while Kcom's had that, it's not been on a time pressured basis. It's not been on a, that there's a constantly changing competitor. It's been at the pace that Kcom might have wanted to do in the past. Great achievements, but in a way controlled. Yeah. Now there's a bit more chaos. So you've got, so innovation in a chaotic environment is a key skill when you're being challenged.
Yeah.
Agility. So you have competition, you are now responding, and you're responding quickly, but think about all the way through the systems that you have, the organizational capability that you have, the processes that you apply, that the communication now to your customers and prospects, that has to be faster and more flexible and agile and changing all the time. So you've got to be resilient because you're going to have setbacks, and so if I think about all of those things that are required as competencies, they are the exact same competencies you need when you are challenging, because you are challenging somebody who's got the brand recognition, who's got the customer base, who's got the ability to speak to those customers, who's got quite honestly deeper pockets, to respond. And so you then need, I need to be innovative. I need to have agility. I need to be resilient. I need to be flexible. All of those same things exist when you are challenging. So it's really strange. Although from a marketing and complexity of some of the marketing and go-to-market and customer management, you're dealing with two different areas that have got different challenges. The core competencies of your leadership team and your people are exactly the same.
Yeah. And how aware do you think your customer base is of this change? Are there some that are, quite belligerent, saying, right, yeah, I've never had a choice, I'm just going to change for the sake of it? Have you done much research and insight into how they're feeling about this change in the market?
Yeah, look, of course, right. When you are the challenger, price has to be one of the levers that you pull. Yeah, because particularly in a some would call it a commoditized market where there's is it moving towards being a utility? I don't kind of quite agree with that, but if you accept that price is a big lever, and you have an existing set of customers paying a particular amount of money, then of course you are going to be attacked, and people are going to go, well, I like that saving. It's the internet. How different can it be? Yeah. And of course, these we actually have about 16 to 18 different brands challenging us. So although there's 3 other networks, there's about 16 other brands, that consumer brands, that are spending money trying to persuade customers to move away. And of course, they're going to be tempted. We don't
try
know
and buy that market.
Yeah. What you find sometimes though is you get an initial wave, and then you get a set of customers that go, well, actually, I now realize that Kcom was a very quality company with strong customer service, a really reliable network. I got help. They solved problems. They kept the broadband going. Actually, it might be worth paying a little bit more for as I go forward. So you kind of get this initial temptation, which you're going to get.
Yeah.
And then the job is, can we find ways to win those customers back as they come out of their first wave of contract? And can we get our message across, which is our strength, versus where a lot of companies are going with price as the lead.
So has that changed, obviously, some of the messaging that you're putting out into the market to make sure you are reiterating the full value proposition that Kcom gives its customer?
Yeah. I mean, when you've got a really good market share like we do in Hull, in particular, your messaging, whether it be broadcast or social or, wherever, or your website, in a way you have to speak to your customers first and your prospects over here.
Yeah.
Because you've got a lot more customers than you do prospects. And so recently we've moved our campaign to talk more about what you get as a Kcom customer. So what comes as standard? What is the base? So if you are a customer, that's what you get. And enabling us to talk to customers, the prospects are going, oh, if that's what Kcom customers get, actually, I'd like a bit of that.
I'd quite like to come back over to the grass, please, right? Because it wasn't greener.
So we think that is beginning to work, and some of the messages that we wanted to get out as we do our next brand research, so we're just in the middle of that, is starting to show that things we wanted to get across to customers is cutting through to customers. So whereas a lot of brand research says, what are my prospects saying that I need to convert? We're more interested in that particular area of what our existing customers are saying about our brand.
I think it's interesting though, isn't it? Because if you get it right with your customers, to your very point there, is that is appealing to someone who isn't, because they're probably, we've all done, like you say, we've all done, there's suddenly an offer on, you think you can get more service, and then you get there and the kids all complain, Dad, it never works.
Yeah.
And it's the same, isn't it? So I think you're right. It's where you've had the experience where something's gone wrong or it's hiccuped and you've been sorted out, that you go, that's the business. Because at the end of the day, you kind of start to work out, they're working off similar sort of networks to a degree. I know you've got your own, but the quality is the same, or probably better than a lot of other areas. It's then about what you wrap around it in terms of service and add-ons, let's say, that makes it more sticky, doesn't it?
I mean, I think again, if we're talking about in the challenge area where we are being challenged, I think again that we have a DNA through our business of that we've seen it all. There are people in our business that have seen every incident, every what goes on in the network. When, let's say when, for example, when there's a massive game, Call of Duty. Now, if you've got kids, when there's a big gaming download happening, and they are, the teenager is setting their alarm for 2 a.m, to go and get the download, as soon as it's out. You've got people that are scheduling them, etc. Now, when it happens, you get a massive peak in broadband usage. It's bigger than anything that you would see.
Really?
It's
because there's GTA coming out, isn't there, soon? So.
And this is it. So we've now been through dozens of those, and our network team know how to handle that, and they know it's coming, and we're planned, etc. And so just an example, you have that DNA, what goes on, what drives performance, what is important to customers, when are they going to use it, etc., etc. And so we can react to that, and so sometimes you can't buy that, and we'll get into that in terms of if you're a startup or if you're new, you haven't experienced that before.
You don't know what you don't know at that stage, do you? You've got to learn, cock it up, everyone get very angry, and then go, right, we don't want to be there again, please.
And we've been, in I don't, you know, there's none of our original 120 years ago stat, but we have got engineers who have been through that over a couple of decades in terms of, they've been there, seen it all. And having those types of people, in your business, it really makes it, as leaders in particular who have seen that and know how to react to that, that's you can cut through them like Blackpool Rock, and they know.
So that idea then, isn't it? Because you're realizing through experience and through reflection what customers actually want. They might think they want the cheapest broadband, but actually you're starting to understand. And so is that influencing, say, let's call it your recruitment comms against your retention comms, or luckily, is it a similar message? Because there's a fear of the brand becoming schizophrenic, isn't it? Sort of saying, oh, this is Kcom to you, new starters, which BT got a lot of stick for, isn't it? Offers that you got. I was a customer years ago for about 10 years, and then suddenly getting these new customers get this. I'm like, that's not a really good idea, mate. I'm not very upset.
Yeah. You say that, unfortunately, we live in a world, I think, where a lot of times that's an unbelievable aspiration, and you look at yourself as a value and you go, that must be that look at yourself, and we must give existing customers the better deals, because they've been loyal, etc. And your own values go, that must be the way to do it. When you actually look at the commercials in a subscription, unfortunately, we're in a world where you have to get people to switch, even if you're selling quality, that they need a price, unless you're Apple.
Yeah.
You are literally in a price war, but you have to leverage price to do that.
Yeah, there's a window you've got to be in, haven't you? Otherwise...
And if you've got a base of customers, you can't afford to give them those same prices, because you've got an annuity stream in a way that's reliant on the price that those existing customers pay. Now, there are ways around. You can give them more speed, you can continue to give them the service. If they call in and want to leave, you can do retention offers, etc. But unfortunately, acquisition pricing is just a way of the world for us.
And is it helping that activity will tend to be out of the heartland at the moment? Because obviously, as you move into a wider geographical market, or nationally, nearly, we can regionalize messaging nowadays and do very clever advertising.
Well, in all honesty, we have to do it in both places. And the reason being is I did some research with Virgin a few years ago, and we researched the buying pattern of why and when do people buy broadband services. And actually, the biggest thing that came out of it was that there's typically a trigger that people take. There's something happens in their life that triggers them to look at whether they want to buy broadband. And that might be, I'm moving house is the biggest trigger of all.
Yeah.
My kids are becoming teenagers and I want a stable, faster broadband connection because they're doing homework and gaming, and the demand from them is higher.
Keep them quiet, out of the way.
Yeah, that's true. You have a really bad service issue is a trigger. And it's normally a repetitive service issue. So what you've got these triggers. Then on the flip side, you've got typically about at any point in time in the broadband industry, about 20% of people are out of contract.
Okay.
So the other 80 are in contract to some extent. And so what you've got is you're going, right, I've only got in any point in time 20% of people out of contract and as a market that I'm going for, and I need a trigger for them to be actually thinking about purchasing broadband.
Yeah. And
so you go, what's the percentage of that 20% that are going to have a trigger at any point in time? Let's pretend it's 20%. So you end up with about 4% of people available in any one month that are buying. And then you've got to take your share of that market. So even in the world of where we have a good market share, we are still going to have to play in attracting new customers through acquisition offers or, the marketing for that 30 or 40% share of the 4% available at that point in time. And you imagine then that you're then in a game of inches where everything has to be continually improving all the time in order for you to take your fair share. And I think and we have exactly the same where we are challenging. So although we've got a bigger prospect pool to get to, only 20% are out of contract, and only say 20% of those are being triggered. So you have to know your segments. You have to be there where the triggers are happening. And you have to be always on with that attract, because you've got another set of people coming into the market the next month.
Yeah, and be ready for them, and be very aware, I suppose, as well, isn't it, of how aggressive your competition are then being. Someone just trying to buy the market for a couple of months to get bums on seats, as we used to call it. Yeah, a lot going on. So obviously, Kcom have historically and traditionally, more recently, always been quite innovative in how they're evolving their offer and product. What does that landscape look like for the next 5 years? Where do you see the market growing for yourselves, not just in core? Are there new services coming online? Are you looking to widen your offer?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do start to see a change in market dynamics. So I think for the last, if you think about the broadband evolution in a number of stages, you had we talked about it previously, we went from dial-up to broadband. Then it's been a gradual story of broadband gradually increasing, well, not gradually, but basically continuing to just increase speed. Still down the same copper lines. Remember that? Yep. So originally that was what we call ADSL, where it's copper all the way along and you're using the phone line. You used to see remember those splitters that you would have that you plugged into your phone line, and it would divide off the broadband and the telephone. Yeah. So
you'd have two little sockets in it. Yeah. You used to have on every plug socket, didn't you? Like,
yeah. So you had that evolution. Then we moved to fiber to the cabinet, which was where fiber came into the cabinets, and then you use the copper phone line for that last connection from the cabinet.
Shorter distance to the home.
Yeah, although sometimes that was, hundreds of yards, and that's why people got differing broadband speeds. Yeah, because depending how far you were from that. So you had that evolution, and that bit's lasted quite a while. So that if you look, people have talked about 40, 50, 60 meg of broadband, and that technology has been optimized to do that. And by the way, that's a pretty good service. That's what I get. Where I live, I won't mention their name, but I'm a VDSL customer. So I get about 60 meg, and you know what? I've got a family of 3 teenagers, and we're multi-device, and I get a solid service. I do my connected, my Netflix doesn't buffer, etc. And there are occasionally times where there's a bit of contention, etc. But pretty good, yeah. You got that. Now we're in the next evolution. Now Virgin were the competitor; they were using coax, and they just held the broadband price speed superiority for years. Then Kcom led the way in terms of putting full fiber across the network, and now BT OpenReach are now doing that. So we're now in the next stage, which is everybody will get full fiber, which is you're in speeds of between 100 and 900, and actually, so the next set of technology that's slowly getting there is you're in the 1.5 gig per second, 2 gig a second, etc. So we're in the next phase of that. But what we're seeing is you have a great leap in service from being like I am, VDSL to full fiber, but actually full fiber going to 2 gig, and if I'm getting 500 or 900, you're not going to notice that difference. And so what we are seeing is actually consumers are now really more interested in the quality of service in their home. So the Wi-Fi, can I get it in every room? So if I've got a 3-story house and my router is downstairs, there are some people going, I'm using 4G upstairs, or I'm having to put multiple extenders through my
the
home.
boosters,
Right?
yeah.
And so what we're finding is that people are wanting more in-home experience as opposed to raw speed. So that's one. Number two, they are after reliability. People working from home. I'm now streaming, you look at Sky, they're moving from satellite to a broadband delivered TV service with Sky Q and Sky Glass, yeah? So people are watching linear live TV on a broadband connection these days. So you got to have, well, I don't want that interrupted, particularly if I'm watching England or Scotland or Wales in the Euros or whatever. I know I don't want it buffering when I'm streaming TV. So broadband reliability, yeah, it's up, it's available all the time is second. And the third thing that we're seeing customers want is control. So we see people are wanting to go, how can I control the in-home device connectivity? How can I see what's connected? How can I see whether that's working? How can I diagnose my in-home connectivity? How can I control whether my kids are connected to broadband after 10 o'clock at night?
Yeah.
Can I
and be able to flick the switch? Yeah.
Can I turn their devices off from the network? Because I can't sit in the room with them and suddenly they've got some other device out that, and they're playing games at midnight or whatever. And so I think that there's now an element of that in home, it's reliable, and I've got control of how that broadband is used in my home.
So does that involve, because obviously certainly the latter is a kind of software management, isn't it? It's the interface, because on most systems, I've had Sky and BT and etc. in the past, you can go to a domain, can't you, and you can get your management, but I'm pretty savvy at this stuff and I can't work out what that code is. Is that, like you say, is that a Game Boy? Is it something that should be connected? So I suppose it is, and it's about giving an interface that the average person in the street can go on, off, and identify what these devices are and whether they should be being used at 10:30 at night.
Yeah, and you're right, because that control and ability on an app to control, we have in every other facet of our life. And so I think that that's now coming of the in-home Wi-Fi experience, and that's where we go. That's where we're going next. Yeah, that raw speed, is now not. Once we're into that full fiber world, that raw speed is now no longer the differentiator and what's important.
Exactly. It's an expected norm, isn't it? Like you say, it'll be rare you ever use the capacity. It's because I think it is, isn't it, interesting about, I have this discussion with my wife. It's like, no, we've got broadband that comes into the house that's there and it's at this level. It's our Wi-Fi because we're in an old stone barn. She goes, well, I can't get it in my office. It's because we need that you switch the booster off, you unplugged it to put something else in. What's that got to do with it? It's like, and it's nothing to do with her, but that's actually one of the key performance elements of getting your service, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's rare that the core pipe in has damaged. Obviously it happens, but very rarely.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's that, as I say, I want my core pipe to work, and then when it's in my home, it's the end user experience, not the router experience that I'm after.
And that's going to be fascinating, isn't it? Because it's going to start to change very much how we communicate, how we engage, how we recruit customers, because the messaging is going to be about putting you in control, isn't it? And actually, it's quite powerful, because a lot of parents are terrified about the access the kids have to elements of the internet and elements of gaming and stuff. That will be, to a huge family chunk, a huge USP, won't it?
Yeah. So that making investments there. So that, and look, in the other element is that the customer experience, actually. So first of all, nobody wants to call you or contact you about your broadband. So let's just say, I don't know about you, but I don't actually want to ever phone my broadband company. Yeah,
Never can help it.
I want it to work. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I want a great experience on the end. Yeah, but if I do have an issue, I want to resolve quickly, and I want to be able to contact through whatever channel I want to contact you.
you
So
choose. Yeah,
if I want to do chatbot on WhatsApp, I want to do that. If I want to phone you, I want to phone you. If you can, if I want to speak to you face to face because it's really complex, I really want to do that as well. And so I think there's also, while we've got those from a product service perspective that I talked about earlier, those three things, I think underpinning all that is, can I get help when I need it through the channel of my choice? And that's the other area I think that you can differentiate in this market again. But it's really strange because people want that, they're not always willing to pay for it, and it's how do you communicate across to people that it's worth paying that little bit more for? Yeah, because there are some some smaller broadband companies that the broadband goes down at 5 o'clock on a Friday, you can't get anyone, they're fixing it on Monday morning for you. I don't know about you, I cannot imagine the hell that I would go through in my house with a weekend without broadband. It would be like they'd rather turn the water off than the
yeah. I love it. I love that we've come that crucial part there. So let's explore a little bit about back onto you again, Neil, in terms of this organisation is going through change. Most of it positive, most of it opportunity. Yeah, you've got some competition, but like you're saying, that's actually driving it. So what do you think when they get pointed to you as the MD of that retail side, they saw in you? What is your leadership skills that are bringing that team together?
So I think again, being in the challenged area, I think it is what we talked about, that in my DNA. Yeah, there's I've seen it all. Yeah, well, actually, probably not all, but then I'm still surprised with a few.
As much as best could, yeah.
But yeah, I can cut through both at a market level what's been going on, because I've seen the competition, I've seen pricing wars, I've seen regulatory changes, I've seen the evolution of product and customer need through my time at Virgin Media. So I think there's that element. There's also an element of resilience there. In terms of I kind of see it as I always, when I'm coaching some of my team, I say, look, one of the important things to have is balance. Yeah, as a leader, yeah, things are never as bad as they seem. So don't get overly down about them, because there's solutions, challenges, but solutions. And don't get overly excited when you have a win, because while you want to celebrate the win, round the corner, yeah, somebody's going to be, fighting back.
Something's coming.
Yeah, something's coming. So I think balance is really, really, really important in terms of how you deal with the highs and the lows, and not to get too down or too, up about those. Stay level with the appropriate celebration of the wins that you do have. So I think I bring that. And I think as the board and leadership recognized that Kcom was going to go into that change, it was, what could I bring from seeing 16 years of constant...
Yeah, the NTL, the Virgin, and yeah.
There was that. And then I think, so that's the kind of core skill. What have I seen and done and can bring? That's the time served bit. Yeah.
You get your little strides for that, don't you?
That's the time served bit. I remembered my advisory, and I'd have my day rates, and they'd say, bloody hell, what are we paying for? You said, you're paying for my time served, not my time spent.
Yeah.
So that's that. But then I think from a leadership perspective, first of all, I'm a big believer in purpose-driven leadership. That I think that people at all levels and whatever part of their career are really, really, they want a purpose it doesn't have to be some, in most industries, that's not going to be delivering, saving humanity type purposes. Yeah. That is going to be, are we trying to win in a particular market? What are we trying to do? What is the anchor on which we are making decisions that people can see their part in that? So have a purpose. How are you connecting people to that purpose and the role that they do? So that's a big belief that I have. And then what are some of your competencies around data and insight that you're using to continue to evaluate the resources and execution that you are giving to those people to deliver against that purpose? And that's my kind of leadership philosophy, that if you do that, your people, and give people the freedom to meet that and link that themselves, I think you will succeed as a business.
I was going to ask you that about how in organizations where changes have now pretty much become the norm over the last decade for you guys and will continue to be, it can go two ways, can't it? Some people fear change so much that it can paralyze them. And it's interesting, that word there, that I was going to actually ask you, how much autonomy does the teams underneath you and the board have to adapt? Because stuff's happening all the time. It's not like this route, right, we're going here and it'll all be fine. You're going to be zigzagging, you're going to be coming back a bit and then lurching forward. So is there a sort of culture in the organization that allows that autonomy?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. I think that it's getting there. Yeah, I think, I'm not saying it's there. I think that it's there in different elements. I think that, for example, in consumer, I think we've had to bring that faster. We've had to adapt in that market. Your challenge always is, when you're a legacy business, is that the first place that adapts to that is those where they're closest to the customer. So your marketing, your sales, your product dev, your care, your customer experience, all of that, those customer facing, they tend to be people who have got a different mindset. In terms of, I'm all about the customer. I'm trying to do change. I can see what's happening in the market. I need to react tomorrow, etc. But you have downstream organizations like IT, like engineering, etc., who aren't as close to the customer. So you're having to find ways to link in them to explain why you need that change. And they have, for the right reason and the balance, they have a more structured, organized mindset, which is, well, we need to make sure it's checked before it goes out and it needs to be quality. And have you thought about the 10 things that are going to happen if you make this change? And and it's how one of the challenges, I think, as an existing business, is that you are having to try to manage across those two cultural elements. Both are right. So both are right, and they're
just coming from a different starting point, aren't they?
Coming from a different perspective. So I think the only way you do that is, one, I think you just have to be upfront with people about why you're making those decisions. So look, this is happening in the market. This is what we are doing. And by the way, I might be throwing it away next month because something's happened. But but let me explain why we're doing that. Why I come to you every day with a new request, and you're going, why are you doing that? Why are you changing everything again? Well, unfortunately, one of the other 16 ISPs has decided to do something, and we need to react very quickly. So I believe in that. And I believe in, again, setting that requirement that says, look, this is what we need from you. I'm not going to manage you on how you deliver that. I want the output. So being that output based, can you get me any product change done within 3 weeks if I come to you? You go figure that out. Yeah. Well, and they'll come back and someone will say, we can do it in 5, and go, well, okay, can you nudge it to 4? And you have that kind of debate. But you have to
arm wrestle and decide.
Yeah. Well, you have to have every area of the business understanding why you're making the decisions that you're doing at, you call it the front end of the business, or the customer interacting part of the business, because seeing it every day, and they're seeing the challenge every day, and they're speaking to customers every day, or they're speaking to prospects, or they're seeing the marketing research, etc. So I think that's important in terms of, and then the other one is I think you can never underestimate the importance of insights, and I think that people mix insights and data. Oh, yeah, most companies have tons of data. Yeah, but do they have people who can access that data, link it, and provide you with the insights around what is going on? Because again, if you're a marketing person trying to talk to an engineer, you need to talk to them about data and rationale and why that's happening. Yeah. And so I think that data insights is the common language across the organization.
Yeah. And maybe sometimes misconstrued as to what it is. We have a research business in the group, and they use a what cube thing, and it's exactly what you said there. There's the what, which is the data. The next one is, so what does that mean? And then the third one is, so what should you do? And that's that journey, isn't it? Because like you say, we've got more data in our businesses than we've ever had. And sometimes it can be overkill. And I suppose going back to what you're explaining is one of your superpowers, that experience of seeing change and understanding and keeping calm, is like saying, right, knock this noise out of the way. These are the trends that are coming through. And I think it's going back to what you're saying about it's going to make Kcom a fascinating business if you can build that culture of constant change for good, not like becoming schizophrenic and flip-flopping here. That's going to be so powerful, because we don't know what's coming, do we? I mean, I'm sure you've got a better idea of connected devices and running the home. I've had a guy on the podcast from a business called Give Energy, and it was fascinating. They do the battery storage at home. And one of their USPs is similar. That's what I was asking you about. Is the software which actually manages that. And they've spent, wouldn't care to think how many hundreds of thousands of pounds to develop an interface that means you can optimize this basically white box that holds electricity. But that to them is what the consumers are saying, great, I've got this, what do I do? And whereas they've built this incredible interface, and the easier it is for someone to engage and use a service, then the more they're going to use it, and the more, like you say, suddenly you're not quite as sensitive about it. Obviously, there's always a elasticity of what they'll accept. So I think that is a big challenge. I mean, if you achieve that, would that be, you'd be quite happy to have a new stripe on your arm that was what success would look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I always believe, I think if you're not learning in a job, I think it's time to move on in any leadership role. If you are, all you are doing is going to your internal already developed behaviors or
set piece
knowledge
meetings
or going back, I think that's the time when actually a business isn't, or that role within a business isn't challenged anymore, and that's where you get coasting of anyone. So I think that you always have to, you get your energy from an ability to go, you're right, I'm absorbing, as you say, another stripe, another Cub Scout badge that I've got. And I think at the moment, that is the one I think I'm learning most is how are you bringing a company that's been around for a long time, how are you developing that culture of the change is now constant, and it's change that you can't control.
Yeah. It's all happening, isn't it? It's set off that. Yeah.
So it's less about the stripe that I'm getting is, am I able to pass what I've got and bring other people to get their stripes in that world? And I think that's what I feel I'm getting right now, and actually really enjoying that. I think that as you get older and you're in a particular senior position and you're less, I don't know, you as you go through your career, I think you feel a lot more pressure about yourself. That there's in that mix of I and somebody else. Yeah, as you're younger and trying to make your way in the career, you naturally are focused a lot more on the I bit. And I think as you get to my age and where I am, I'm in a place where I switch that into a what am I bringing to others, and that's kind of the stripe that I'm trying to get. That when eventually my time at Kcom does come to an end, that I feel that the success to me will be, do I leave other people with the skills that they'll be able to carry on to move in their career. And then that's the stripe that I'm trying to get now.
I love that. I think it is, isn't it? And it's that idea that a lot of the people who have done the podcast recordings with me have said that they've actually enjoyed it because they never stop. They never stop to reflect, and you've just reflected on and actually, obviously, maybe I'm a therapist at heart. I didn't know that, but a lot of people have been saying it was so nice just to stop and realize what I have done and what I have, not in an arrogant way, and just like, because you've now got a context by which to review your success and then saying, right, how do I give somebody a leg up? I always have a question on these, and it'd be a bit like, what would you tell your younger self starting out on that career that you've learned now, just to help you maybe not make one mistake? Is there any one sort of piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
Yeah, I think you know what though, it's really strange, isn't it? Because there's an element you wouldn't have checked that you go, well, I wish I'd have changed that, but you go, you don't know how much that contributed to where you got now. And if you actually, even though now you look back at yourself and go, well, actually, I wish I hadn't have been like that 20 years ago, maybe that was the thing that helped.
You had to go through it to realize, yeah.
Now it's a really difficult, it's almost a sliding doors moment, isn't it? That said, if I'd have done that, I may not have ended up having the great career or the great influence that I feel I can have now, and the ability to be a purpose-driven leader. But I think there was an element where, when I look back, I think again when you're younger, I think you listen less, and you kind of feel you're right. And
The arrogance of youth, should we call it?
It isn't. Well, and I mean that even into my kind of 30s and maybe at early 40s, that and also how business was back then. That I'm not saying it was the kind of like 80s yuppies and kind of hedge fund managers, which was, I'll just it all over everybody. But there was an element of you needed to stand out. You needed to focus more on yourself. And I do actually think leadership has evolved into more successful people now are those that are engaging a team earlier in their career and they're getting things done through others. Whereas I think back in the kind of late 90s and the 2000s, you still needed to be a little bit more of a corporate animal and
a bit more ruthless, a bit more like knocking people out of the way a bit.
Yeah, and I think that part of that was so I was very, I don't think I was the best listener. I don't think I was the best compromiser. And what one of my core strengths, and I talked about, is that insight, is I have an ability, and it's just one of my core, just natural gifts, so to speak. I wish I'd have been a footballer, but my natural gift was that I can interrogate data and trends almost in an instant. So if somebody gave me a report, I can go, I can see exactly what's wrong. Yeah. So that gave me an advantage against other people, that I would be able to be in meetings and go, that's the answer.
This is where we need to focus.
And I'm maybe 80 or 90% right, but but I wasn't able to bring some of those other people who didn't have their core competency was they were reflectors and would be able to think through some of the other elements of that. But I kind of feel sometimes that, polished my way through using that. And so, yeah, I think if I'm reflective, it's that listening and that other people have got a different view that would have made things even better. But as I said, you never know, because maybe I hadn't been noticed. If I hadn't,
we'll never know, will we? We'll never. But I do think there are so many ways to learn, and obviously, especially the younger guys that are coming through, they've got access to more information and more data than we ever had at that stage. And I think sometimes that's great, but it's not always in context. So they believe they know it all in the politest possible way, and they need someone with a bit of grey hair just to sort of help guide them and apply that knowledge properly. And I think that's part of our role, is to not say you're wrong, but say, have you thought of it this way? Because you've read one view.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
And how do you bring people who aren't naturally demonstrative? So people are attracted to high energy, demonstrative people that they want to follow. Yeah, that can paint a picture that gets them excited. And I suspect there are a lot of people, younger people in particular, where I think, social media has actually probably altered, and we're bringing some of that. So we're at the heart of bringing that connectivity.
It's all your fault, Neil. All your fault.
But so they don't necessarily have the skills to persuade people and engage and listen to them, but tweak and resell and position. A, because we're not doing business face to face as much. B, we're doing it over written word and email and quick messaging. And so I think one of the future leaders, if I was giving advice to them, is particularly that the younger you are, is how do you get that little bit of energy and ability to persuade someone and engage them, rather than, and slightly adjust your style and so on. And that is a learned skill. That is only through experience do you get to read that and understand that. And I think that's the one thing I think that the future leaders need to adapt, because we're not teaching it them in their natural society like we would have had.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that. I think that's a cracking piece of advice, and hopefully people will see themselves and also come and ask.
Yeah,
the other way, isn't
it? Because I do believe, not just myself, but I believe, as you say, a lot of grey haired, bags under the eyes, I actually, when people ask me for help and I'm able to help them, it is that's the most fulfilling element of my job. And so, and I actually think for 95% of people in my position or at my age, actually, whether you're an engineer who's had 30 years of knowledge, or whether you're a leader that's had 30 years of large operational leadership, I think there's nothing more fulfilling for people than doing that. And so I think that the future leaders, future engineers, you should ask people for help, because they will give you time and they will feel fulfilled about it.
Yeah, and it can give you a leg up. Neil, thank you so much. That's been fascinating. There's been some really interesting lessons in there, and we will all watch Kcom's rise and taking on the world over the next few years and see if you hit that success mark. So thank you very much for your time.
No, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. It's been good fun.